Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Hard Claim with Viva La Sam. I'm Sam, and this is a show where we talk to people who play Blood on the Clocktower and get their player perspective of the game. And joining us for this week's episode is Emma. Emma, thank you for joining.
Yeah, no problem, Sam. Always happy to talk about Clocktower.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we're here. So we do have our opening hard claim question. We have a Bad Moon Rising loaded in per your request. Not because it was your first choice, but because it wasn't as popular as Trouble Brewing. uh, but we don't mind showcasing different scripts, of course. So you drew the Goon token.
Mm-hmm.
So if we were chatting on day one to start out with, what would you claim?
Um, really depends on what I'm feeling like for Goon. Goon is one of the sort of more versatile roles I find. Like, depending on your mood and depending on how you want to do things. Uh, you know, is the Goon is something of a free agent. Like
Mm-hmm.
that agency sort of changes based on my mood, like based on whether I somehow become evil day one, which, you know, on BMR is only a Puka or a DA. So if I become evil, I always hope it's a DA who's made me evil because it's unfortunate if I'm evil and the Puka is gonna get a kill for a night, extra night.
Right.
Um, I think generally as a goon, though, most oftentimes as a goon, I play under the assumption I'm going to become evil at some point. And if I'm evil as a goon, I'm going to try to die at that point. So I like sort of as goon bluffing things that the evil team's going to want to pay attention to and look into. Fool can always be an interesting goon bluff, especially if you're evil. Fool can be an interesting goon bluff because if you're evil, especially early, it's probably because of a DA. If you're alive and evil early, it's probably because of a DA, especially if the kill pattern has not been interrupted by missing deaths. So Fool is always a good way to. Fool and Sailor are always nice because they can let you sort of have an excuse to see if you survive execution. Because if I'm evil, I'm generally trying to die as a goon. If I'm good, if I feel like I want to stay good, I may just play open goon. Um, or I could always just bluff as a different outsider if I'm good. I think those are sort of the baseline things I want to do.
I think I've only been goon about once, and I just my goal is just I'll try lunatic and see if it works or not. It got me evil. Didn't win me the game, but it got me evil at least.
Yeah, I prefer being good generally, but with the roles that sort of are balanced around making an extra evil some of the time, I like to lean into that balance a bit.
Yeah. What are you feeling like today? Do you feel like being good or evil?
uh Probably good. Like I've been mostly in a very like I really want to be good in games mood lately.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, good news. I have not woken you up and told you that you're evil. So,
Perfect.
all right. When and how did you discover Blood on the Clocktower?
um, Gosh. Uh, I think it was about 3-ish years ago at this point. Three, maybe 3.5. I don't know. I'd sort of discovered Blood on the Clocktower because I was during COVID. I had started just watching Twitch streams while I was working at home because um, it was just so like monotonous to work at home all the time, every day.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I started watching Twitch streams, and it became like a habit of like I'd have Twitch streams on in the background while I worked. Um, and this was just mostly because Twitch was like always new stuff, like compared to like television shows that I could have on in the background. Like I could pay attention to Twitch less, and I could, and it wasn't like just putting on like the same sitcom.
Right.
because if you like have sitcoms on for like 8 hours a day while you're working, you quickly run out of sitcom. And Twitch always being new and was, but I primarily watched Hearthstone streams. I had like watched Hearthstone streams like occasionally pre-COVID, but and Hearthstone was a game I played like on the side. Like when I was living in Chicago, I would play it on my commutes. Once I moved to Arizona, I didn't have like public transit commutes anymore, so like I played it like occasionally, and I would watch Hearthstone streams a lot. But I was sort of starting to get bored with Hearthstone in like late 2021, early 2022. There was a group of Hearthstone personalities, though, primarily from their commenting community for their esports, who, like, one of them said on Twitter, it was then called Twitter, he was going to start streaming some social deduction games. This was his name is Sottle, and this was a group that includes some people are still sort of involved in the Clocktower community, like Lorinda and Nizahe. Started playing some Blood on the Clocktower in streams, and I was like, I'll check this out, and I liked it a lot more than I liked Hearthstone. And like for a while, like they like went real hard into it and then burned out quickly and stopped. Like they were, because like a lot of them were like either already like semi full time or part time streamers. Like they just like went in hard. Like for them, like when Sato did like the streaming thing, he was like streaming Hearthstone most days for several hours. Like not like, most streams these days are like 2 hours, 2 games scheduled once a week maybe, whereas like they were doing like 3-4 games every day for like weeks or months on end. uh, and like because I like this so much, when like uh, they were slowing down, or when like they didn't have, or like the hours they weren't streaming, I started looking out for other Blood of the Clocktower content. I was like, this seems pretty interesting. And then I started finding things like the official channel and NRB, and then like Patters and CT Blood of the Clocktower, missing pieces. And I spent like then another like 6 months just watching streams without ever playing games or looking into it. Like I'd never been in the board gaming community. Board gaming wasn't a hobby of mine. I didn't know where you'd even look for this stuff. And eventually, like because I wanted to start playing, I started looking for players that like discords that were open, Clocktower discords. I found my way to the unofficial and the CT servers pretty quickly once I decided to look. But then I spent like another 3 months just sort of languishing in those discords, never having played a game of Clocktower. And eventually, I started playing some games on CT in, I want to say like May or June. They had a great beginner night story told by Jackie back then, Wednesday evenings, and there was like a really awesome crew of people who were playing regularly in those Wednesday night games at that time. Like Jackie was a great storyteller. I can't say enough about her. And but it was like people like Bambi, FM Jason, Jordan. Gosh, who else was regulars back then? Ryan was sometimes showing up in those games. There's like a really good great people, and there's other people I'm sure I'm forgetting. And I eventually and then like I sort of started, playing on the unofficial a few times on like nights and weekends, holidays. And it just sort of built from there. I eventually found my way. There was a looking for game post in the unofficial ones for another Discord server, which I joined, called ECG, which I don't really want to talk too much about ECG, but it was a really important community for me for a long time. I found my way there. I got involved in the ECG community. Then I won a contest when the Sunday stream for TPI was doing the characters who got left out of the original character contests. I won I think, cannibal contest and ended up on the TPI stream. And then Clocktower was just like my permanent hobby, I guess, from there.
Do you remember what those like very first games were like for you? Like, do you remember how those went or anything?
I remember my first game. uh, my first two games, I know I pulled the Saint and the Mare token. I don't remember which order they were in, and I think it's safe to say, like, you know, I know that Saint game I played, whether it was my first or second, is also the last time I've ever openly admitted to being the Saint in a game of Blood on the Clocktower. So I would say, like, in that sense, like, I decided I did not like that play pattern and put it aside. I did not like the Saint's play pattern. So in that sense, I do remember that. Uh, and I know in the Mare game I played, I know that I got killed in the night because I was too trusted, which was an important educational moment for me about the Mare.
Right. Oh, what? So what ended up hooking you about the game? Do you think?
Um, I think, you know, I had played Mafia, what we called Mafia. I, Werewolf and Mafia are the same thing with just a slightly different skin.
Right.
Uh, I had played like a fair amount of Mafia in like high school and middle school. Uh, I was involved in like theater programs, and like it was just something that we would do occasionally in theater classes in high school and middle school, and like as like theater games,
Mm-hmm.
like in improv classes and in theater classes, we would play Mafia sometimes as theater games to get you sort of thinking about like these elements of how to sound truthful. And I always really liked these games, but you know, they had their limits. They had their limits where the game itself was kind of interesting, but the drawbacks of the game were really brutal. Like, and this gets into the sort of like why Mafia and Werewolf don't have that same level of replayability is most of the time when you play a Mafia game or Werewolf, you're a vanilla townsfolk, a vanilla villager, whatever you're calling the terms. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have anything special to do. You're just trying to read people socially. You don't have anything to back up what your reads are. And then you die and you're supposed to sit there and be quiet. uh, and like Blood on the Clocktower's ability to take that fun engine of reading people socially and mix it with the logic puzzle was just super appealing to me. I think like professionally, I'm a lawyer, and when at least when I went to law school, when you take your law school standardized exam, there was a section of that which is what was called logic games. I think they sort of removed these, which I was sad about. But logic games I found were just super fun to do. Like I was like, I could just do these for fun. Like this is barely even a test. This is just, ooh, this is so much fun. Let me, and so I just like sort of liked that logic puzzle element mixed with the social element. It was just super fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and how long was it before you was able to play in person?
I played in person for the first time at ClockCon DC, the original one. Um, yeah, that was the first time I ever had a chance to play in person. I should say I shouldn't say first time I had a chance. That was the first time I took a chance to play in person.
Right.
Yeah, there were opportunities I had to play in person that I just didn't follow up on before then because I had gotten into this game online. Like the online community was where I played it. I was like, how do I want to go meet new people in person at some open event? That sounds horrible. uh, so I didn't play in person until ClockCon DC, and I've played in person a lot more since then.
What was that transition like for you, going from online play to being able to play in person?
Um, I think like in person, like two things that jump out to me. The first time my story told in person, um, I started running my first vote, and one of the players, it was Ryan, says, "Emma, clocks go clockwise," or something
I'm
like that.
I might have been in that game.
And I'm like, "Oh yeah, they do go clockwise."
Was that
uh,
BMR?
it was a BMR, yeah.
Yeah, I think I might have been in that game.
And I was like, "Huh, yeah, clocks do go clockwise, don't they?" um, like the and I tell that just because like the apps and the both the old brain tool and the current app, like they like do a lot of this automation of the game
Mhm.
mechanics for you, which you have to keep track of in person, both as a both as a player, but especially as a storyteller. That makes it a very different experience. Like it's much
Yeah.
more hectic to keep track of things, and that sort of gets into point two, which is like in-person games are much more hectic generally, which I think makes them a lot of times more fun,
Mhm.
because the inability of having conversations with everyone, not necessarily like in person. I frequently find that like you just run out of time to talk to everyone, especially in bigger games, and you don't get around to talking to everyone, not like because you're trying to exclude someone, just like you run out of time legit, like in a way you don't online. And people are much and it's much more difficult to sort of collate all the information you can get, um,
Mhm.
which opens up a lot more space for evil to try things, a lot more space for evil to do things, and a lot more space for evil to push alternative worlds, which I think makes the game feel more interesting and more balanced, especially with um, custom scripts and sex and violence, which online can frequently feel like there's just too much information to evil to handle. It's less of a problem online for Trouble Brewing and BMR because the information is more cabined anyway.
Right. And do you take opportunities to play in person now, or is it still
Yeah,
mostly online?
yeah. I play generally twice most months in person, uh, not counting like going to conventions and such. Which it would be nice if it was more, but twice is a good solid amount of not letting it further take over my life.
Right. Well, so when you do sit down to play a game, whether it's online or in person, and you're getting ready to draw your token out, or before that point, what are you thinking, or what are you doing at that point? Are you looking over the script, or are you just kind of feeling everybody out, or just chilling?
It it largely it depends a lot. A lot of the times, frankly, I'm not gonna look over the script unless I'm storytelling it.
Mhm.
I'll just take whatever paper people hand me and draw a token. Um, it it largely depends on like the group and community I'm with when I'm playing in person. If it's more like people I know personally, whether it's because it's you know a private circle that I've become part of, or it's my like online friends meeting up at a convention, I'll probably be sort of relaxed, joking, talking to people about stuff. Uh, More like public facing games, I can tend to be a little bit more reserved because I'm always sort of discomforted with the celebrity aspect of the community streamers, and I don't really want that to affect the gameplay.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I was going to ask, and I guess now's a good time about those. What it's like to play on streams, being a public face in the community, and how that may or may not vary consciously or unconsciously when you're playing not on stream.
Um, I would say like it's important to me when I'm playing on stream that I try to play in ways that I would play in person. Um, and or that I would play off stream. I really don't want to be in situations where I'm making choices for as a player or as a storyteller, but especially as a player, because I think it will amuse Twitch chat. I try to make my choices based on, will it be fun for the other players I'm playing with? Will it be helpful to the team I'm on? I don't want to just be clowning around for the crowd. And I think like what sort of does change in person and off stream private games is I'm very self conscious about the idea that I want to make sure that my voice isn't causing things to happen because it's my voice. So I think in that sense, like the biggest difference is the biggest like change I have from stream versus non-stream games is I tend to be a lot quieter and intentionally less assertive in public discussion, because I've been in games where it feels like I make a nomination and people vote on it not because I gave reasons that made sense, not because it was the right thing for them to vote on for their team, but it feels like they've done it because I'm a quote unquote famous, in very heavy air quotes, because none of us are famous. This is an incredibly niche hobby and an incredibly niche micro community.
Right.
Clocktower player, rather than because they were thinking it through for themselves, and I really dislike that feeling. So, like, I travel a lot more in person, especially like a few months ago I went to a public event with like 15 or 16 with like 15 players or 16 players or something, that a lot of new players playing Trouble Brewing, and I look at the storyteller and I'm like, I'm gonna be your traveler. I'm not like being the person who's knows this game too well for this group right now. I'm gonna be just sort of sitting here in the corner as your whatever traveler you want, doing traveler stuff, and just like not really. And then I'm gonna travel away relatively early and just watch the rest of the game.
Yeah, that's cool. And I definitely agree. I mean, anybody who knows me knows I've talked about, for me, it's really important that I run my games, stream or otherwise, and play in them in ways that I feel like, as best as reasonably possible, mirrors the in person game. And I'm generally of the opinion that, fortunately, Clocktower is such a game where if you just play the game, ignore that maybe 5, 10, 100, 1,000 people are watching, that it's still going to be entertaining, even if you're not trying to do anything special.
Yeah.
And I think that is part of the reason, like that kind of ideology, for lack of a better word, is why I like Grim Scenarios as a Discord community, and because I know there's a lot of thought behind just making it a fun place and not a place where people are just kind of doing things without thinking about anybody else, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's very much like running a community that's both like meant to be a public play space and is also a content creation churn engine. Is It's a very fine line to walk at a lot of times, and like it can lead to some like very hard choices, like both publicly and internally to us, that are never fun. But we do try to balance that well, and we do try to make sure that both on and off stream we put like the focus on like just be having fun, just be being kind, just be being nice to your fellow players, because like that's what this game should be about. Like if no one has ever noticed you or been impressed because they're like, oh, that player did something cool that I thought would be really funny for my Twitch viewers, so I could, and that would help me get more Twitch viewers if they did that funny and cool thing on Twitch. Like that's just not how like that's never been what we're looking for, and it's never going to be what we're looking for Twitch players.
Yeah. All right. So thinking back to sitting down, getting ready to draw your token. When you do draw your token, do you hope that's blue or red?
I hope it's blue almost always. Like I said, like the solving of the logic puzzle and the figuring out who's lying, that's the fun part of the game for me. That's the that's the that's the sweet part. And then the medicine is sometimes you have to be evil and you have to figure out how to break the logic puzzle and trick other people.
Yeah.
And you want, like, it's not that being evil isn't fun, but like 99 out of 100 times I'm hoping for a blue token. Uh I like to feel around in the bag for much longer than most people because I choose to believe that I can feel the color blue. Uh, it does not work, but I choose to believe it anyway. So I like real I like grab a bunch of different tokens. I feel them. I'm like, does this one feel blue? Nah. That one feels red. I throw it back, and I'm like, all right, this one feel no. I that one might be red too. This one's definitely blue. And then I look at it and I'm like, it's the freaking imp. What did I do to myself here?
Must drive you crazy when it's the last token in the bag.
I try not to be the person with the bad last.
Amazing. Are there particular kinds of characters you prefer to play, like information characters or power characters, passive, etc.?
Outsiders. I think outsiders are the. That's another thing that I think that Blood on the Clocktower figured out in an incredibly fun and interesting way compared to other social deduction games. Is the good players whose abilities do not help them, and needing to figure out how to work around those drawbacks and help your team in spite of your ability is, I think, truly special. So I'm always looking for an outsider, unless it's the Saint, in which case I'd really rather not. But other than that, like, I am most excited when I pull an outsider token. I'm most excited, like, almost invariably. And that's not to say there aren't townsfolk or minions or demons I like a lot that I'm get excited by, but I want that sweet outsider experience more than I want anything else.
Last night I did run a game of BMR on my stream. Base 0 outsiders, but a lunatic was in play because of the Godfather, and it was fascinating to watch how that played out. Because even for a character who, especially in online play, usually figures it out very quick, the whole game there's this doubt of, oh, is there actually a Godfather in play? Is this really a lunatic? Is this just evil? Putting us on for a ride. And
Oh yeah,
it's fun to watch. Yeah.
It's super fun, and unfortunately, I find that evil just doesn't bluff outsider nearly enough, which is a real bummer, because uh, just so much of the time, like, the way outsiders end up playing around their drawback is they can just publicly claim to be an outsider, and everyone in, like, the group men will be like, oh yeah, demons don't bluff outsider, minions don't bluff outsider, and then they're fine, like, and they just become trusted good players really quickly.
It's kind of funny you mentioned that, because in that game that I mentioned, the reason that there was doubt on the lunatic is because we have another player, Jen, who and who we've had here on Hard Claim before. He wasn't in this particular game, but apparently this is a common play for him, is to bluff a lunatic. So there was a lot of doubt as to whether or not this is something this other player was doing or not.
Love that Jen is trying to fix that meta. Like, on our podcast, Milk and I are on a project. We're sort of like ranking the characters through their strategic value, and when we were talking about lunatic, one of the things we pointed out was, it can be a really powerful evil bluff, because for some reason, when you just say, oh, I have the demon token, but don't worry, my kills aren't actually going through, everyone just believes you and trusts you for some reason, and you never get killed. It's so wild.
Yeah, it can be a lot of fun to watch and crazy to play with, like, because you just spend the whole game like doubting what's is this real? Is this not real? And this definitely happens in Trouble Brewing a lot too, with the Baron and the drunk and the outsider question in that script. Yeah.
No, yeah. If there's one thing I can convince people to do, it's bluff outsider more often when you're evil. Um,
My my I think my problem is when I'm evil, almost all I want to do is bluff outsider.
oh,
So,
mine too, definitely. Uh,
I think I had one game on the TPI stream. I said ahead of time, I was like, you know what, I'm not bluffing outsider, or I'm not claiming outsider this game, no matter what I am. And I end up drawing an outsider token. I'm like, of course. Like, well, guess I'm claiming townsfolk. All right. Well,
yeah, no,
speaking of the base script, oh yeah, sorry,
I
go ahead.
love outsiders. Like they're just the way they, yeah, like as a balancing mechanism, as a fun mechanism. Chef's kiss. That's the true design breakthrough of this game, I think.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, it's a fun
Werewolf at
aspect.
some point realized it needed abilities that did things for most players. That's why variants like Ultimate Werewolf are built around that. Like the Outsider, oh, so perfect.
Yeah, we were doing Ultimate Werewolf before I got into Blood on the Clocktower, and what really was drawing me to that game was the number of different characters and abilities. Essentially, what it came down to, and yeah, and they try to balance it with plus and negative modifiers, with negative modifiers, being detrimental, basically the equivalent of outsiders. But it's really hard to balance the game. I love that Clocktower has a structure that you can follow no matter what script and set of characters you're building for. So speaking of the base scripts, we have Bad Moon Rising loaded here, but you also you know talked about Trouble Brewing. So what is your favorite base scripts and why?
um, well, we loaded BMR, so I feel like I should plug it, but I will start with Trouble Brewing. Uh,
Yeah, good.
Trouble Brewing is just so fundamentally perfect. Like the script design for it is so incredibly tight. There's like one pair of characters that I think have an awkward interaction. That's Virgin and Undertaker. I guess two if you include very bad storytelling decisions with the Recluse and the Scarlet Woman. But assuming we ignore very bad storytelling decisions, the Virgin Undertaker thing is the only sort of awkward thing in that they both learn the player whether the player executed day one is good, basically. Um, but like the sort of perfect balance of Trouble Brewing, where every townsfolk has the outsider or evil character that undermines it. Like the washerman and librarian are undermined by the spy. The empath and fortune teller are undermined by the recluse. The investigator is undermined by the recluse. The drunk is there to cover edge cases. The Raven Keeper is undermined mostly by the poisoner, I think, more than the other characters. Same with the Undertaker. These are really poisoner targets. The fortune teller as well as a poisoner undermine character. Like
Soldier.
that, the soldier is a poison undermine. The monk is a
Yeah,
poison
yeah.
undermine. The mayor is a poison undermine.
Mm-hmm.
Like this sort of like every townsfolk's ability is appropriately balanced by a minion, and every minion is appropriately there to fight against certain townsfolk. Is so perfect, and it leads to a result where like you know I once saw a calculation that there's some like 650,000 different possible Trouble Brewing setups. It's bigger for the other scripts, but I am more confident that I would enjoy each of those 650,000 Trouble Brewing scripts setups than I am with any other script, and that's across from player count 7 to 15. Um, like because every time I play a game of Trouble Brewing, when you get to the end game, evil always has an alternative world they can sell. Sometimes it's not that believable because it involves like the poisoner hit exactly this person night 1, exactly that person night 2. This person was also drugged, and then the poisoner hit this person night 3 is the only world evil can sell. But like that is always there. Like nothing is ever perfectly solved on Trouble Brewing. You're ultimately using the information to say, okay, what worlds work? And given the universe of worlds that work, what are the which one do I think is most plausible? Which person who is the demon in world X versus world Y sounds more good on Final Three is ultimately the question that Trouble Brewing gets to. Which person that has to be the minions in world A and B, or NC, ideally, are sounding most good. So you get all this information, you use it to narrow worlds, and then it still comes to that pure social read at the end in Trouble Brewing. And that is the perfectness of the game. Like, you want games where it doesn't feel like the evil team looks at the plethora of information against them and goes, oh, well, guess what? Guess we lose. There's too much information and it all points to us. You really want to avoid that. And I think a fundamental flaw of custom scripts in particular, and also for that matter, Sex and Violence, is they don't do this. Like, there are townsfolk that are just not countered on a lot of custom scripts and on Sex and Violence. There are minions that aren't able to counter townsfolk efficiently on custom scripts and Sex and Violence. And what stats we have available about win rates from Brain on the app really draws that out. It's like Trouble Brewing is 50-50. Like, good and evil win both times. So like when you draw your token, you never have that feeling of, oh no, we're screwed, because like we might lose. Whereas custom scripts and Sex and Violence, it's like custom scripts, it tends to be like low 40s as the evil win rate. Sex and Violence is a little better, but still closer to the custom scripts than you'd want, and further from TB as you want. And it's this sort of perfectly balanced replayability of Trouble Brewing that I will always be in awe of. And then we get to BMR. BMR also, from what we know from the statistics, has a very close to 50-50 win rate. But the difference between BMR and Trouble Brewing is, whereas Trouble Brewing is like, it's like a painting you would expect to find at, the Art Institute of Chicago or the Louvre or the British, or like the or like these museums that focus on like the great paintings of history, where every paint stroke you can tell is part of a perfectly cohesive whole of pristine beauty, and you're like, oh my goodness, the skill that it took together to put this together, the vision, the ability to imagine form to paper. Oh, it's so perfect. And BMR is sort of that. The comparison for BMR, we're not even going to stay in the art world because I don't want to offend any like modern art aficionados. We're going to be like, BMR is like, you go to like the pound to adopt a dog. You find this like weird sort of ugly dog, and it looks at you with that look, and you're like, oh my god, this is the perfect, most goodest boy in the world. And you bring it home, and it is the most perfect, goodest boy in the world, but it's also that like bizarre weirdo who was there because a bunch of people passed it over and looked at it and was like, that dog's ugly at first glance. Like, that is BMR. Like, everything about it feels like it shouldn't work. Like, there's so many things on BMR that are just like, that is not good. Like, the professor or the minstrel, it's like, these characters can very easily break games, and they do break games. Why are they here? These do not seem fully thought through. Like, is the Moonchild an outsider? Is it a townsfolk? I do not know. What is up with the Assassin Goon interaction? The words that are written on these tokens do not make sense for how this interaction works. Like,
and trying to put all these on custom scripts really showcase how broken they can be.
And it's like, everything about this script is a disaster. And then like you you run across someone who's like tries to make like a fixed BMR where they like take their particular pet peeve disaster character out. Frequently it's the Zomble or the Mastermind. Sometimes it's the Courtier. Sometimes it's and they try to replace it with a more balanced character. And then you try to play these and you're like, yeah, no, get rid of this witch. I need my Mastermind back. The witch does not help me as the evil team on BMR. I do not want people dying to witch deaths if I'm evil. I do want the extra day the Mastermind might be able to give me.
I found that with the Boffin release script, which was basically BMR with Mastermind replaced with Boffin. Maybe there's one other substitution, I can't remember.
It
But
was just that.
I remember playing it and
Sorry
realizing
about that.
and realizing we don't have to worry about double tapping because there's no Mastermind. So that just like that small change really changed the gameplay a lot, I thought.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't want to like attack the release scripts for characters, though. I frequently avoid playing them for reasons. But I will just say there's a lot of townsfolk abilities on BMR that I just do not want to have as a demon. Like, I am not interested in Tea Lady protecting my neighbors as a demon on BMR. I am not interested in randomly pacifist saving good players. I do not, in fact, want the Exorcist ability. I guess it gives me an extra chance to pick a goon without having to waste a kill on it, but other than that, no thank you.
Right.
uh, it's such a finely balanced machine that you would never know from looking at it, and that is what I find just so fascinating and beautiful about it. Is, you know, I've seen Zomble DA Mastermind games that have been delights where like someone dies each day and night and the game progresses at a reasonable rate and no one is quite sure what world they're supposed to be building at the end, where it gets close to that trouble brewing feeling. I've seen like Poe games where the Poe is forced to bluff Zomboul because of how things go. Like, and BMR has much more risk of disaster games than Trouble Brewing does. Like, some of the most disaster games I've ever seen have been BMR. I'm thinking of games where the Shabaloth gets -2 kills over the course of the game. Or where the Godfather is Courtier drunk and the demon talks to them quick early and decides to bluff an out of play outsider and ends up in a double claim with the in play outsider. Like the downside of BMR is it has much higher risk for these disaster games, because if things work wrong, they can work really, really wrong on BMR in a way they can't on TP. But like a BMR game that doesn't end up in the disaster zone is so beautiful, for like watching how this island of misfit toys comes together to create something cohesive that creates an interesting logic puzzle that does so many different things. Like,
So we have an analogy for Trouble Brewing. We have an analogy for Batman Rising. Now I feel like I really need one for Sex and Violence.
Sex and Violence, I think the best analogy I can come up with is the Oscar Wilde story, The Picture of Dorian Gray, where Dorian Gray is, for those of you not familiar with your Victorian literature.
I definitely know, but for the benefit of everybody else.
Dorian, the sort of plot of Dorian Gray is the main character, Dorian Gray, he has gained a form of immortality and permanent youthful beauty by transferring his aging and his sin onto a painting that he keeps hidden away. And if the painting is ever destroyed, he'll immediately retake all the years and sins that he's managed to escape by locking them away in the painting, and die from old age and the weight of his sins. And that's what I think Sex and Violence is you look at Sex and Violence, you read it, and you're like, oh, these characters are so fun, they look so pretty, they look so beautiful. They are secretly under the weight of their sins and their their lies, kept away in the locked chamber of, dear goodness, there are so many ways for a sex and violent game to quickly become unfun and oppressive for at least one of the teams, and sometimes both of the teams.
Yeah, I always say, for my opinion, S&V has some of the highest highs of the base scripts, but also some of the lowest lows.
It's
Uh,
especially like online, I think,
mm-hmm.
which is certainly where I learned to play, is the amount of information in sex and violence and the ease of sharing that information and the ease of just everyone collating all their information together in sex and violence just leads to so many games where the evil team is just trapped, where there is not a way out for them, um, in a way that I find super unfun.
Yeah.
And then in some of the games where that's not true, the evil team does it to themselves by, instead of like using the pit hag ability to help their team, they turn the evil twin into a Serenovus that doesn't get to act for a night later, and then spends a night not killing anyone because they wanted a Fengu, which suddenly lets the poison townsfolk get good information, even more good information, and an extra execution.
My my group definitely has that meta of, if you have a pit hag and you don't have a Fengu, you make a Fengu and an outsider as quick as possible. And
I was storytelling a game of sex and violence recently where like the Nodashi poisonings were like some of the best Nodashi poisonings I'd seen in a long time. Like they had just found like, by the nature of the bag, they had like gotten the perfect rolls you would have wanted poisoning as the Nodashi if to win that game. I was like, oh man, with these poisons, the Nodashi is in such a good position. And then 2 days later, there was a Fengu instead of an Odashi. The formerly poisoned townsfolk were now sober and getting good information. The information was collapsing in on evil. They jumped to an outsider, and the outsider was like executed the next day. And I was like, huh, yeah, that makes sense. That was what was going to happen. You gave them an extra execution, and you took away the poisonings, and suddenly there was too much information for y'all to overcome.
yeah. So one of the things Sex and Violence does introduce is madness.
Mm-hmm.
So I am curious about your thoughts on madness in the game. Not necessarily just limited to Sex and Violence, but just in general.
I love madness personally, but I want to preface this by saying I really love the idea of madness. I love being mad. I love complying with madness conditions. I love deciding when it's a good time to break my madness condition. I think madness, despite all that, madness is one of those mechanics in Blood of the Clocktower that creates that risks socially polarized situations, which aren't fun. Which can be not fun is what I should say. Like, especially in groups, I run a large public server that has lots of games, like at there or at a convention where people are playing who don't know each other super well, where they don't know the storyteller very well, where the storyteller doesn't know their players very well. Like, there's a much larger risk with madness versus other mechanics that someone is going to feel bad because they thought they were complying with madness, but the storyteller didn't. Or they thought this person would enjoy being made mad as the same thing every day, but this player actually doesn't like that. Or so many other things. Like, madness is like, I think that one of the dark sides of this game, not to be a downer, is like
Real spicy.
is like it can put people in situations emotionally where no one has done anything wrong, but people's feelings are very hurt. And madness, for many of the ways that I love madness, it's the mechanic I think I have seen most lead to that space, where player A thinks this is fun and isn't wrong. Like, player A does not have to. I'm not saying player A is wrong. Player A does something which is completely fair play within the realm of the game, which is completely fun for them and for most players. But for player B, it's just not fun, and you end up in that situation where there's real hurt feelings because of how the madness mechanics work. Um, so I have, because of that reason, sort of like a complicated relations with madness. Like, I think madness works really well with groups that know each other really well. Where, okay, I know that if I want to make John mad, and we'll just use a random name, uh, John will love any form of madness and be super okay with anything I do with him in terms of madness. If I'm the Sarah Novus, I can Sarah lock him as the same thing. I can make him change his role every day, and he'll be happy either way. In fact, if I don't do these things, John might be a little bit hurt that he wasn't targeted by the Sarah Novus. Like, when you have that sort of like player knowledge of each other, I think madness can be really fun. When you have sort of the more public Clocktower spaces, madness can be this really dark thing that can mimic what bullying looks like without anyone being the bully.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Our group does know each other pretty well, so usually we don't see things like that. But I think I would agree that it is a mechanic where I have seen that in the past, and yeah, I think that all makes sense.
Or like, I've played on games and like even like the TPI stream where, I get or I'm a good player. I get Sarah locked into a double claim with another good player, and that good player just doesn't like being in double claims. Like, it's really like they really dislike it, and like I don't think the Sarah Novus may not even know they've created a double claim. They just wanted to lock down whatever I was, and it creates like this social tension with this player 3 who is really angry, is legitimately upset about being forced into being in a double claim, and doesn't understand why I'm not backing down.
Yeah.
So I guess what I would say about madness, really good idea, really fun mechanic. Please be very thoughtful about how you use it.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I know we've had Navian on before, and I think it's some other people who like madness, but are, I believe I'm remembering this correctly, but like madness, but don't believe in Sarah locking people, because for a lot of people that's just not fun, which makes sense.
Like, if you know the person likes being Sarah locked, feel free to Sarah lock them. But it's something where I would err on the side of caution.
Yeah. Well, it's probably a good segue into our divisive character segment, where I do like to ask people about divisive characters, or what I see as the community generally debates a lot on, or don't always like. So the first one, it's the only base character and is from Sex and Violets. How do you feel about Snake Charmer?
I have made my peace with Snake Charmer. It was a character I initially quite disliked. I think it's never going to be fun for a minion whose demon gets snake charmed, and the demon then has to sort of out their minions. And they do. They have to out their pit hags. They have to out their evil twins. Like, they have a responsibility to be playing to win the game, I think. Like, they can't just let pit hags and evil twins especially run wild. Sarah Novus and witches are much less harmless if it's a 1 minion game and you're the snake charm demon and your minion is a Sarah Novus, you may as well just let them be. Same with the witch. You might as well just let them be. I think like that part of it can be super. It can lead to what we don't like to see, which is games where people aren't having a good time because of the mechanics of the character, and I think that's a bummer. I think like I haven't like talked with people who might know, but I know like Ben Burns like frequently will talk about Snake Charmer as if he expects it to be like a game of chicken where the snake charmer like makes 1 or 2 picks and then starts picking themselves. And they're trying to not press their luck. But a lot of people play snake charmer as, ooh, I'm gonna go become the demon, and that can be a really fun experience with the snake charmer. Some of the like stupidest games I've ever played involved me doing really stupid stuff with the snake charmer. You know, I played a game at one of the Vegas conventions once where someone was nominated day one, and I was like, that defense was weird. Bet they're the demon. So then I snake charmed that night. They were the demon, and I was like, huh. Well, my intuition was correct. And then I killed a barber, and I was like, well, I don't really know what's going on here, so let's save this barber swap for later in case I need it. And then I did that 2 or 3 more times, and then another player in the game was like, whoever is the demon, stop making barber swaps. It doesn't help you. And I'm like, oh, really now? So I killed the barber again and swapped myself with the demon, and then snake charmed them again, and then got myself executed to win. It was incredibly fun for me, but I don't know if it was fun for like the demon who like went on the journey of evil demon, good snake charmer, evil snake charmer, good demon, evil snake charmer. I don't know if it was fun for them. I don't know if it was fun for like the minions who were part of this charade, and like that sort of gets the problem with snake charmer is it leads to games where like team this is a team game, and when like your teammate betrays you, it can be really unfun.
Yeah.
So, but I've made my peace with it. I think like it serves an important function for script building, and players just need to have like the right mind for snake charmer scripts.
Yeah. All right. How do you feel about Poppy Grower?
Um, you need the right script for it. You need demons and minions that can sort of safely operate around a Poppy Grower. I think there's a lot of characters that work really well with Poppy Grower. Some have been released recently, some have existed for a while. And I think there's a lot of characters that work very poorly with Poppy Grower that end up on Poppy Grower scripts. Like, if it's the right script, if I like feel like the minions aren't going to be on an island, if I feel like it's not going to be the end of the world for the demon if they kill a minion or two, I think it's fine.
Right.
With the recent Cannibal Jinx, it's better.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I was glad to see that Jinx get added. All right, next character here. How do you feel about Heretic?
Again, it needs a really good script design. Unlike Poppy Grower, it's not very popular, and you don't see it a lot out as much on scripts where it doesn't belong. But it's some of the most fun games I've ever played have been games involving Heretic. Yeah, I think that's the most I should say on that particular topic. But I think Heretic on like a well-written Heretic script where like both teams get to play the Heretic game, and there's always risk for both sides. It can be extremely fun. I think there's a script out there called "Okay, but Hear Me Out" by Bambi and Jason, where the Heretic is Stormcaught, the demon is a little monster. There's a special rule to prevent the little monster from just being given to a dead player. It's led to some of the best games of Clocktower I've ever played, like the Heretic puzzle in that game. I think on a script that's designed to support it, Heretic makes the game a lot more fun. I think if it's just sort of tossed on there, it can be really brutally unfun.
I will say I do enjoy. There's a meme on the unofficial server where somebody asked, I don't remember, it lists a few different like townsfolk characters, and they were asking how to make it balanced. And then the next image is them saying, "Oh, I figured out how to balance this," and it just adds heretic.
That's not how you balance things.
It's a fun meme, though, at least.
It's a fun meme. It's a fun meme.
Yeah. And spoiler, most of these characters really are going to be very script dependent. Um, uh, which in that case, let's go ahead and go to the next character. How do you feel about Atheist?
I love Atheist. Uh, when I draw the Atheist token, I play it a little differently than most people. Namely, I don't admit to being the Atheist no matter what. Uh, uh, which I think makes it more fun. I think like there's a few things about Atheist that I think can lead to unfun experiences. One is you say, "Hey, I'm the Atheist," and then you immediately get executed to make sure you're not a evil player bluffing Atheist. Which, like, any role where the town's reaction is to immediately execute you if you claim it, I think has some problems. But I think in the case of Atheist, that problem is fixed by simply never admitting you're the Atheist under any circumstances. Um, I think Atheist, it requires so much trust in the storyteller.
Mhm.
Like, I would never, never in a million years, like, see a description of a script at like a convention with a storyteller I didn't know and be like, "Ooh, there's atheist on this. I'm gonna go play this atheist game with the storyteller I don't know." I wouldn't, sign up for an atheist script on the unofficial. I wouldn't sign up for one on my server for the most part. But if it's a storyteller I trust, atheist will lead to some of the most fun games because the storyteller sort of a storyteller storytells atheist well. I think leads to some of the most fun games. And I think like the other thing about atheist is an evil team that bluffs atheist well, whether or not they admit to being the atheist or not. And again, if everyone just adopts my attitude of never admit to being the atheist under any circumstances, like it's fine. You don't have to admit to be the atheist. You could bluff atheist without ever saying it. But when they can convince the good team that rules are being broken, it's truly some of the most like fun ways to lose as a good player. I also think the other thing that makes atheist unfun is people's fondness of pairing it with the drunk. The sort of guarantee I will always tell you is if for some reason I feel like I need both drunk and atheist on a script, the atheist is not allowed to be drunk in my games. Like, if you have the atheist token, you are the atheist. It is an atheist game. That's a promise from me. And if you're an evil player, there is no atheist in the bag, and you can do what you want with that knowledge. I think like the drunk atheist thing can create unfun things for both teams, which like it just doesn't. It's not as interesting as you think. Like, that's my atheist thoughts in the spiel. I think with a storyteller I trust, with a storyteller I know to run atheist and I trust to run atheist and I trust to do it well and focus on making it fun for the players, I will run to play atheist scripts with them.
Do you like it when storytellers give a sort of side quest to the atheist, so to speak?
Again, I think like side quests are fine. And I say that with some apprehension about saying that. Like, I think the side quest, if you're going to do a side quest atheist game, and I've run side quest atheist games, I've seen other people do it, I think like the number one thing you have to do is the side quest should create a puzzle for the group to solve, not a like not like the rest of the group is doing one thing and one player, probably the atheist, is doing something else. Your side quest needs, it's a team game. Your side quest needs to involve the team.
Right.
The second thing is, I do not care how fun you saw a particular side quest atheist game being done by someone else on a stream. If you're gonna do a side quest atheist game, write your own, figure out your own, do it your way. Don't just, you know, rip off what someone else has already done. Like, I think one of the sort of classic side quest atheist games as a viewer I loved was when Patters, put a lunatic in the bag, went to two players, the atheist and I think someone else, and said, if you can convince the lunatic that you are their minions and this isn't an atheist game, and when I get executed, you'll get the extra special super duper win. Like, that I think was great for that group at that time with that storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just like take what Patters did in that moment and run it in your game. Like, do something original, do something interesting if you're going to do a side quest, and do something that you've thought about. Would my players enjoy this?
I've only like barely dabbled in what you would, I guess, call a side quest. I think about the most I've ever done is I did have a cult leader in an atheist game. I decided, because I knew he wouldn't mind this, I decided to tell him he was evil. I wouldn't really consider him evil, but told him he was evil as a cult leader. And then the next day I said, you know what, you're not evil. This actually is an atheist game. If you can convince everybody to raise their hand for a cult win, that will be a good one for the good team. And I did that because I know there were at least one player in the group who just does not raise their hand for cults at all. And unfortunately, he didn't get that win. I think they still won anyway. But
Yeah.
but it was something that he found fun, and it involved a group. And for our group, at least at the time, I thought that was decent. But I don't usually do it very much because I think it's so hard to know how to get it right, I guess. And there's plenty of other things I can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
there's like enough ways to mess with an atheist game that you don't need to do those. But if you're going to do them, think about what will be fun for your group.
Right.
Think about how you can make it a team puzzle to solve and not just like one player doing something off in the corner by themselves.
Yeah. All right, one more character for this list. How do you feel about Legion?
Ooh. I'm surprised at like the characters that made this list and didn't make this list.
To be fair, I haven't updated it in a while, but
Legion, I think, Legion is, again, I think, perhaps even more so than every other character we've discussed in this sort of line, a extremely tricky script building thing and an extremely tricky storytelling thing. Again, some of the best games I feel like I've ever played, some of the best experiences I feel like I've ever had as both a player and a storyteller have involved Legion. And I love Legion for that. So many of the worst experiences I've had have also involved Legion. And I think the experiences are bad for two primary reasons. The first is people do not respect the Legion How to Run guide. We've talked about this in discussion forum, so I know where you and I both stand on this. Is
yes.
The Legion How to Run guide is abundantly clear with the following things. The good evil count should be reversed. There should not be outsiders. If there is going to be an outsider, it comes from the Legion side, and it's +1 from the normal good evil count. So that means in a 12-player game, there should be 9 Legion and 3 townsfolk. So I think like people don't trust themselves and they think, oh man, only 1 spare execution for good? That seems too tough. I better have 4 townsfolk in there. And then they read like the outsider part and they're like, oh, and if I want to throw in an outsider, that comes from Legion. So now I have a 7-5 game with 4 townsfolk and an outsider. I have never seen 7-5 Legion be interesting. I have never seen 7-5 Legion be fun. I have never seen 7-5 Legion be a good idea. Please stop it. Do not do it. Stay away. The correct number of legions is reversed.
It is very hard to convince people of that for whatever reason.
Like, the worst part of it is people run 7-5 Legion, and they think they're supposed to kill a Legion in the night every night that way, which you do that in 9-3 Legion because there's only one spare good player. If there's suddenly 3 spare good players, that means there's at least 2 good players who are probably going to need to die at night. But if instead you kill a Legion every night, you end up in the situation where it's, you know, day 2 or 3, and Legion is suddenly a minority, and good can just execute at will, which is really unfun for Legion. So I think that's the number one thing is, please, for the love of God, if you want your Legion games to be fun, if you want your Legion games to be interesting, please, please, please read the Legion How to Run guide and follow its advice about how Legion is supposed to be balanced. Please do not make people play 7-5 Legion games. Do not do it. And if you're going to do it, understand that having 2 extra good players means 2 of your early night kills are probably going to have to be good players so you can get to back to what the Legion count is supposed to be. The second thing I think...
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I really love seeing Legion trying to bluff the rest of the town, including making that outsider count work. To me, that's super interesting to watch.
Yeah. And, you know, it's really annoying for Legion when they're trying to bluff to make the outsider count work, and they can't because there's an actual face-up outsider in play.
Mm-hmm.
And when they try to make the outsider count work, they end up making it not work. Like, Legion needs the space to operate. Legion needs the outsider space to operate in. Please don't take it away from them, please. The other thing I think people that like makes Legion games frequently unfun is you end up with like scripts that have an overwhelming amount where so like not to pick on it because like a lot of people's first Legion experience is like half of the 108, this very old august script that just takes Trail Brewing and tosses on a Vortox in Legion, and you like put in your bag as your 3 townsfolk in a 2 minion game, a chef, an empath, and a fortune teller. And I can tell just like if that's your bag, if it's a chef, empath, fortune teller, and then in a 2 minion games we'll say 7 to 9 legions, I can tell you right straight up, these legions are not going to have a fun time because all 3 townsfolk have information that is have really super strong information that unambiguously says this is definitely a Legion game, and no, Vortox does not save that. You want a more ambiguous information set, a narrower information set. Some of like I think the like Legion script I've played that I think is best is Dusk in the House of the Damned by Shade, which is an attempt to basically read the description of Midnight in the House and the Damned and then take released characters and say this might be what Midnight looks like. And I think I think Shade probably did a fairly good job of using released characters to capture what Midnight will probably look like without any knowledge of what Midnight will probably look like. Because not only do the characters sort of feel like the experimentals on there, the Kickstarter, and she recently did an update with added some of the more new ones. Not only do they like start to feel like a cohesive whole with Legion, it's stuff like King and Choir Boy and Village Idiot. They not only feel like a cohesive whole with Legion, but they create that sort of ambiguity, and the information that might exist is powerful, but it's not conclusive by any means. And I think that's what Legion needs. I think Legion works really well with like, I think VI in particular, like Legion and VI like can go hand in hand into the sunset, dancing together about how perfectly they work together. King I think is great with Legion. If the King ends up being the good player who needs to die at night, fine. If the King ends up being In Final 3, also fine. Like, you can always lie to the king about being a Legion game, which makes it fine. I think, yeah. I think, like, you need the right type of information, and the right type of information isn't information that's only true if it's Legion or Vortox. Which a lot of scripts have information that's only true if it's Legion or Vortox as their engine, and I think those are invariably not fun for Legion.
Makes sense. We won't go into depth, but I'm just curious what other characters you think should be in this section?
I thought Politician was going to come up.
That would be a strong contender, yeah. I think people don't. I think it's not, at least from my experience, very popular enough. I don't know how many people have a lot of Politician experience. I guess I don't know. Maybe
That's
they
fair.
do, but I do think that would be a strong contender for this section.
Yeah, that was the one I really expected to see is Politician. There's other characters I have feelings about, but
yeah,
Politician was the one I sort of was thinking as we were talking about the other ones. What am I going to say about Politician? That
maybe I'll swap out Poppy Grower for Politician or something. I don't know. I'll give it a think. I do have one more section here. We call it this or that. We'll go through it kind of quick because for the interest of time, but I'll just name two characters. You can answer however you want. It is purposely vague as to what is being asked. So let's do a couple townsfolk. Let's go with Philosopher or Pixie.
Pixie. Pixie and Philosopher do very similar things, but Philosopher is like breaks much more games. So Pixie. If I'm gonna have a role duplicator, I want it to be Pixie, not Philosopher.
Pixie's probably one of my, I think, top townsfolk, and probably maybe one of the top characters in the whole game. Really,
I agree.
I like it a lot. How about Acrobat or Gambler?
Ooh,
Now that Acrobat's a townsfolk.
it always was. Old Acrobat. They didn't need to change Acrobat's ability to make it a townsfolk. It was already doing townsfolk stuff. I think Acrobat. I think Gambler. There's a joke I sometimes have when talking about script writing, where it's like, whenever you see a BMR character on a script, and you start talking about problems with the script, you're like, oh, all the BMR characters are anxiously hoping it's not them that's going to be called out this time. But it could be any of them, any of the times. And Gambler, I think, without like the depth of reasons for gamblers to die that aren't to their gamble and to live when they should be dying that BMR has, is just too strong.
That makes sense.
Whereas Acrobat, I think, is a much more like somewhat useful most of the time range of townsfolk that I like.
Yeah. All right, makes sense. Let's do some outsiders. We have Ogre or Goon.
Ogre.
I love Ogre.
There is nothing I like better than not knowing my team. It's just so perfect. Yeah, no.
Yeah, great. Klutz or Puzzle Master?
Klutz. I think like Klutz and Puzzle Master are both sort of interesting challenge outsiders where you solve a puzzle and it has a dramatic effect on the game state. But find a good player or you lose is like much more fair and balanced to both teams than if you solve who is specifically puzzle drunk, evil loses, which is really sad for the evil team. So I will always pick the character that I think is more fun for both teams, which is Klutz.
All right. So for minions, we have Godfather or Assassin.
Again, they both get a little wonky off of BMR, but we'll say within the safe confines of their safe confines of BMR, I think Assassin is like, I think, the most versatile of the BMR minions in that it does the best job of confusing the game state for the good team, which is what I want to be doing as a minion. It's in very many ways, I think, the poisoner of BMR, where if it doesn't need to do a whole bunch, but if it gets its one super strong poison, one super strong kill that makes a false gossip look true, or a tea lady neighbor look evil or whatnot. You just like when an assassin goes off well, it does such a beautiful thing for the game.
Yeah. All right. Next up, Goblin or Baron?
Oh, Goblin. Goblin is. I could Goblin. I think can be on any script unless like the other three minions are like Vizier or Psychopath and Organ Grinder. So it's always obvious where there's a Goblin in play.
Yeah.
The challenge of having to like tell people to tell people if you execute me, you will lose, and then get them to execute anyway is it's so perfect. There's no token I smile more when I see if it's red.
Fantastic. All right. So we'll finally do the demons. First up, we have Lord of Typhon or Kazali.
I think
Okay.
Lord of Typhon.
Okay.
Kazali is, I think, as a general matter, more interesting in a lot of the way that I like my characters to be more interesting. But it also is a lot more socially polarizing in ways that I don't like my characters to be socially polarizing. You never want to be the Kazali who realized you ruined someone's day by turning them from their favorite townsfolk into a minion, or vice versa, being the Kazali who realized this person thought you would always make them your minion if you had a choice, and then you didn't. Like I don't like that sort of social dynamic of Kazali. Whereas Lord of Typhon, it's similar, but that sort of stuff isn't there.
Makes sense. All right, and finally we have Fengu or Poe.
Poe. Yeah.
Just like
Poe
the power
just
level of it, or
not so much the power level. I think Poe's power level is like relatively limited. Like 1.5 kills per day if you know charge triple kill isn't particularly strong. It's probably on the weaker side for demons. But like figuring it out as the Poe, like when to time your charges, when to make one kill because you need to, is so. It's just so fun. Like having to play that game, it requires you to learn so much about what's going on with the good team. Like, oh, I love it.
all right. Well, we have one final question here. So looking at the script here, Badman Rising, what character would you like to be in real life?
I feel like if I could just be a professional tea lady, that would be a pretty fun life. Just like having a little tea shop where people came in and I served them a warm, hot glass of tea, and then they left. That seems like it would be a fun life. I don't know if it's a viable life, but it seems like it'd be a fun life.
Yeah, I could imagine my wife enjoying that as well. All right. Well, before we go, is there anything you'd like to plug?
Yeah, sure. We can plug the Grim Scenarios stuff. We have a Discord server, discord.gg/Grim Scenarios, that we have put a lot of time and work into trying to create a place where there is real community Clocktower that has what I would call lightly moderated for the greater good games in a way that, I think we have tried really hard to create a welcoming and fun play space that we're much smaller than the unofficial, which I think helps. 1,500 versus 18,000. I think, and then of course we also have our Twitch stream. We stream Tuesday nights and Saturday mornings. Tuesday nights are at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and Saturday mornings are at 11 a.m. 2 games back to back, twitch.tv/Grim Scenarios. And Milk and I do our podcast under the Grim Scenarios brand. The podcast came first, and the rest of the brand came later. which you can find on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/grimscenarios, or on any podcast app such as Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. Wherever you listen to your podcast, you can find the Grim Scenarios podcast, where we sort of think about how Blood on the Clocktower characters work on a strategic level.
Yeah. And as usual, we'll have links to all those down in the description. Emma, thank you for joining us this week.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. This was real fun.
Yeah. All right, and then thank you all for watching. We'll be back next week with another episode of Hard Claim. Till next time.